Economic Committee of Parliament. The Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah is the one who has been leading this particular campaign. He's joined us on the line. Honorable, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, too, for agreeing to speak with us. So you're saying the government should look elsewhere. Where?
Come again? Elsewhere how?
You said that the government should look elsewhere for the funds it intends to raise, but not at the pumps, as in the taxing or the levy should not come into fruition. There should be alternative means of revenue generation. That's the understanding I got from what you publicized, correct?
Well, no. From what we published, essentially we said two things. The first is that what we were drawing attention to was not just a suspension of the levy, but actually a scrapping of the levy, because that levy is totally unnecessary. That's number one. And number two, we're also drawing attention to the fact that government should take advantage of this window during which it has suspended, even while we're calling for a scrapping of the levy. Government should take advantage of this period for us to have a detailed and a comprehensive review of the revenue lines that we have as a country, particularly the fuel-based levies. And if you study the history of the fuel-based levies, a good number of them, I dare say, have come to a point where they need to be reviewed. And so what we are calling upon government to do, one, is to scrap it because it's not necessary, not just suspend it. Two, is to use this period not just to say we have halted it temporarily, but to do a substantive, comprehensive review of our revenue lines as a country with a view to building sustainable fiscal resilience in how we run our numbers. Those were the two main calls that we have made.
I see, but something must give. So if we scrap the levy, where do we go?
Well, let me take you back. Recall when the 2025 budget was being put together, the government said it was going to remove some taxes, and we agreed that those taxes must be removed. However, expenditure must be cut to avoid creating a 6 billion cedi hole in our budget. At the time when we said it, the response from the government was that they knew how to fix it. And how they were going to fix it was that they were going to reduce the VAT refund threshold from 6% to 4%. And they said that 2% was a savings, which they were going to use to plug the hole. And I'm sure your listeners and yourself will recall that we came back and explained to government that we've worked the numbers before. That is not possible. Because, first of all, that reduction from 6% to 4% is not new revenue. It's not savings. It's money in the account already. You're just moving it from one account to a particular account. The truth, the naked truth is that is the gap that the government is hoping to fill. This whole thing about going to pay debt, etc., is a hoax. The real thing is that 6 billion cedi hole that we talked about is what the government is struggling with, which they are now trying to close. That is what they've worked up to raise about 5.7 billion from this levy that they had sought to impose. Now, the first thing we drew the attention to was the fact that you didn't need to introduce this revenue. What you needed to do was to cut expenditure by that about 6 billion. So that's the first option. The second option is that even if you want to raise 6 billion, if you come to petroleum taxes to raise 6 billion, then you are overburdening the petroleum space. Remember, currently, petroleum taxes alone are accounting for close to 30% of what we pay at the pumps. So if you assume that you can keep adding petroleum levies there, you are overburdening the sector. A point B to that is that the assumption that it will not increase petroleum prices is not correct. Remember, we had a long debate with them. Now it has been proven that if you add it, fuel prices would have gone up by about 8 to 9% today. And remember, the rate of this levy is 8 to 9%. And a point C to that same second argument is that your assumption that global fuel prices will be low for the foreseeable future is a wrong calculation. We said that last week, Monday. Little did we know, a few days down the line, we have been proven right that assumption cannot hold. So what we are saying to government is, don't rush in this area. Let's get back to the drawing board. Let all the ideas that exist come to the fore. We'll share our ideas with you. Listen to the oil marketing companies and civil society groups and everybody else. And let's help you find a way by which you can avoid that 6 billion gap in our budget which you have created.
You have suggested that the real intention for the 1 cedi levy is not to pay the debt in the sector like the government is intending, but there's a different plan. Based on the bill that they brought to the House, which bill has now become an act, do you get a sense that there's a way they can collect the revenue and not use it for what they said they were going to use it without being quote and unquote caught? And what would be the consequence of that if they did that?
So this that they are collecting is eventually going into the consolidated fund. This that they are collecting is
so it's not a special. It's not a special fund. That's not what they came to the house to ask for.
No, they didn't ask for a special fund. Now remember, the NDC government has argued strongly over and over again that when you are going to pay a debt, you must use a particular account called the sinking fund. Everybody who listens to City knows that the NDC has strongly argued that when you are going to pay a debt and you are collecting money to go and pay a debt, you build a buffer in what they call a sinking fund. So if indeed they are going to use this to pay a debt, you should begin to see it in a dedicated fund. You are not seeing it here. Number two, if they are going to pay the 3.1 billion cedi energy sector debt, indeed, then you should see also a sunset clause somewhere down the line that we estimate that it will take X number of years to pay this, and therefore the bill will have a sunset clause. None of these two exist in what they brought. Thirdly, if you look at the history of how this energy sector debt is being managed even by us during our tenure, and sometimes they like to blame us that we didn't use ESLA appropriately. That is why they have to resort to this. When we came to power, the debt was about $2.5 billion and programmed to grow to about $12 billion. And so what we did was to mortgage the ESLA flows to get lump sum upfront money to be able to start servicing a good chunk of those debts. We closed the ESLA PLC program in 2024. By the time we did that, about 70% of the ESLA flows had been used to retire part of the debt. We had done some of the renegotiations. We had done some of the restructurings as well. So even if there's a matter of debt, there are ways to deal with the debt without having to introduce new levies. And the evidence of how they intended to manage this also betrays the fact that they are not going to use this to pay any debt. This is going to essentially become budgetary support without a sunset clause. And where
it may be in perpetuity.
Yes. And where they have put it, which is fuel, is risky. And that is why we've been drawing their attention.
And my question is that, so if they did that, there would be no legal consequence because they didn't come to you saying put it under a certain or special levy or a special fund. So it would have been correct if they did what they intend to do based on what you are claiming they would do.
You are saying it would have been correct if they had come up with a dedicated account.
I'm asking that if they use it for what purpose you claim they intend to, the true purpose they intend to use it for, they wouldn't have broken any law necessarily.
It's not just about law, it's about the propriety of it. Remember, my second argument was the fact that if indeed it was to be used in servicing the $3.1 billion debt, there are ways of dealing with that debt without introducing new levies. And so you can argue that it is not illegal, but what we are saying was that it is inappropriate.
What ideas do you intend to give to the government if the government came to you and said, very well, we will not introduce it based on what you have said, but where else can we get this money from? What would you say to the government? Because taxing is a key aspect of revenue generation for government.
So let's make some assumptions. Let me let you play the devil's advocate for government. Government first has to be honest with the purpose. What is the real purpose here? Are you admitting that the taxes you cut created a 6 billion cedi hole in the budget and you need to deal with that hole? If that is the case, there are some options. Are you saying that you are looking for ways to deal with the $3.1 billion debt based on the contract that you signed? Again, if that is the argument, there are options. So which is it?
Okay. I'm sure because it's hypothetical, we have to leave it there. Now, my next question would be what's happening between Israel and Iran, knowing that Iran is a major exporter of oil. We have not seen an implementation of this new levy, but already we're expecting that fuel prices would rise. Is your fear and your call for it not to be implemented connected in any way of an anticipation of a rise in the cost of fuel? Or your issue is not necessarily related to what the international market and the crude price is stating?
So as at last week, Monday, when we raised this hypothetical question, Iran and Israel were not even on the table. But the point that we raised at our press conference was that crude oil prices on the world market are so volatile that you don't build permanent assumptions in your budget that they will be stable for the medium to long term, and based on that, begin to introduce such exorbitant levels of taxes. The government told us that that was not going to be a challenge for them because their forecasts suggested that it was going to be low. I mean, at the time it was around, if I recall correctly, about $68 per barrel. Within a matter of 48 hours, one incident on the global stage is shot it up to about $74 per barrel on the global stage. Remember, this is an area where about 30%, 25 to 30% of the world's crude oil is produced from. So their suspension is what is rather in reaction to what has happened. It's not our call for suspension. Our warning earlier was that this and other things could happen. They were the ones who had been living in denial that global issues don't affect local economies like how we have been claiming. And we were telling them that you are going into a risky area. Just one incident is what has now caused them to backtrack. What we are saying is, don't just pause and wait because your 6 billion CD problem in the budget has not gone away. How long is this conflict going to last for? And will this conflict resolve itself in such a way that you can use the same route to plug the 6 billion CD hole in the budget? And if not, what does it mean for all the things that you need the 6 billion CDs for, including buying fuel for our power plants? As I'm speaking to you right now, I don't have lights in my home. You need the 6 billion CDs in the budget to attend to several things. So just suspending is not a solution. You either have to cut some expenses so that you can meet the priority ones to the tune of 6 billion, or if your problem is really about the sorting out of the IPPs, there are other ways that we used without having to introduce new levies, and you can use some of those ways. You have renegotiations, you have restructuring, you have options to cause them to move their take-or-pay clauses and their fuel arrangement into their PPA so that PURC will be an adjudicator of that. So I go back to the point that the government has to be honest with its real problem. If you don't tell your real problem, you will not get the kind of apt solutions that you need. Okay. Our reading is that this is about a 6 billion CD hole in the budget which they have to fill. And our argument in filling that one, number one, is cut the expenses, and number two, move more towards PPPs to fulfill what those expenses would have delivered. Because you cannot continue piling taxes on the people as a way to resolve this 6 billion CD hole.
The government you were in, where you served as a minister, I think you were the Minister of Information when we first announced that we had recorded our first case of COVID. If I'm wrong, please forgive me, but I think you and Kwekwaji Mamenu made the announcement.
I was.
Good. Over the period, your government consistently said to us that the double whammy of COVID-19 and Ukraine-Russia war was to blame for a lot of the challenges we had with the economy. Israel and Iran on the rise now. The president has told his Minister of Finance to monitor the events there with the Minister of Energy as well so that they could deal with it. If the government came to us next week and says, we are having challenges, things are skyrocketing, the cost of fuel has gone up, and we blame Iran and Israel for it, would it make sense to you as a member of the Economic Committee of Parliament?
We will be disappointed but not surprised. We will not be surprised because that is a fact. I mean, if you modeled your whole budget on the assumption that crude oil prices were around $58 per barrel, and you modeled with an average of, let's even say, $60, $61, $62 per barrel for the year, and then all of a sudden, in a matter of days, it shoots from 68 to 74, with forecasts that it could get to 80-something dollars per barrel. And if you read the Bloomberg platforms, they are worried that if Iran is a bit more strenuous in its response and the Straits of Hormuz is closed and about 25% of the world's crude oil goes through those straits, then crude oil could go as high as $130 per barrel. So it's a really scary scenario, and it will not be surprising, but we will be disappointed because this is an administration that argued umpteen times that the argument that international economic developments affect local economies is untenable, and therefore we should not be speaking about it. No matter how hard we try to explain that what had happened during COVID, the global supply chain challenges, had caused global inflation to go up. you switch on your TV and you see cost of living crisis all over the world. And therefore, if we were having cost of living crisis here in Ghana, it was directly traceable to COVID. They said, to hell with us. It's not true. When we explained that what was happening in the Black Sea area was limiting how much gas and crude oil could come out of that area, and so fuel prices had been affected and it was affecting us, they said we should go to hell. So if they now come back and say Iran and Israel, we know it's true. That's why I'm saying we are not surprised. But we are disappointed that they are not admitting the truth that they were not truthful to the Ghanaian people when they were campaigning for power.
Based on your reading... Okay, land.
However, when you are hit with those realities, you have to introduce interventions to find ways of tackling it. Okay. It's one thing explaining what the reality is. It's another thing introducing interventions to mitigate it. So even if they say that, they will still have to put on the table credible interventions that the Ghanaian people and the markets can respond to in their bid to deal with it.
Based on your reading of events in the Middle East, should we worry as a nation?
Oh, yes. I have always argued that we don't live on an island. You have to worry when you see some sort of development on the global stage. We have to worry, but this government has given us the assurances that global issues don't affect local economies and that they have the capacity to manage it without us feeling the impact.
I should have said that, or they said you were over complaining, and that you should.
No, but that's no. That's exactly what they have said. I can give you graphic quotations when they said that no bomb landed in Ghana. So why are we talking about Russia and Ukraine? And that's why some people are also asking today that no bomb has landed in Ghana. Why are you talking about Israel and Iran? But the point I'm making is this: they created an impression that it is totally within the hands of local economic managers to deal with all matters. And I think Ghanaians will be fair in having their expectation that no matter what happens on the global stage, they'll be able to contain it here on the local market. We believe in the reality that there are difficulties. They are the ones who have made a whole industry out of it that is not the case. And so Ghanaians will be expecting that no matter the realities in the Middle East, they will be able to resolve it locally back home. But we are saying that come to the table, don't rush it through, come to the table. Now that you've started seeing some of the things we warned about, come to the table and let's work together with you to find resolutions.
To which they should be able to bring the economic back to life. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Sanda.
That's Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. He's MP for Fosia Yerbe. He's a ranking member on the Economic Committee of Parliament. This is how we end tonight's edition of Eyewitness News, which came to you from our studios in Accra. I am Umaru Sandamado.